So I would like to introduce Denny Sargent. He is the author of several books, including Werewolf Magic, Werewolf Pack Magic, and I believe your third book is called Feral Magic. Uh, and so anyway, he's going to be doing a workshop for us today on the history of werewolves. So Denny, I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Uh, am I now showing the Werewolf Magic, Werewolf Pack Magic image?
Yep, that's exactly what I see.
Excellent. Okay, good. Hi, thank you so much for inviting me, and I like nothing better than talking about werewolves. So, and by the way, I this is something new. Um, I have a group on Facebook uh, called Werewolf Magic, and you have to actually say some things if you want to join. So there's a sort of a block there, but I have about almost 900 people in this group. So apparently there is some interest in werewolfism. Um, today I'm just going to sort of talk about a little bit about my book, and then I'm going to work you through the actual reality of werewolves. Werewolves were quite a thing in our culture long ago when the church decided that all of them were evil. Um, but most people don't realize that even before that, in ancient Greece and in other, even all the way to Mesopotamia, um, the idea of people shape-shifting into wolves was a norm. It's only until Christianity that this was eliminated or pushed to the side. So I have a master's degree in ancient history, so I actually know some things from this stuff, even though it's rather it's not the kind of job you're going to make a lot of money being able to talk about this stuff. So today I'm going to talk. I'm using the term werewolfmagic.com, which is what I'm bouncing off of right now, which is my blog, if anybody's interested. And I have tons and tons and tons of stuff there. I mean, maybe I think got over 100 different things. I present a lot. So today I want to talk about the history, lore, and lore of werewolf cults. That's my email if anybody's interested, williamdennysargent@gmail.com. I have a brand new book actually that just came out. I guess I should probably show it. I'm not very good at keeping track of these things, but this is my new book that just came out, which is Feral Magic. Um, this is through Weiser's, not Llewellyn. Uh, and actually, I'm really proud of it. This is really more about animism because what I've come to realize through doing a lot of work and discussions and conversations with people about things like shape shifting and not just wolves, but if we look at the walls of the caves from say 400,000 years ago, we see people who are half animal and half human. So this has been around for a long time. So anyway, this is moving forward from what I've been doing. This is something that people might find of interest, and there are connections there with shape-shifting and whatnot. Okay, so in the shadowy world of myths, legends, and historical sources, we can find the roots of the prolific and fascinating werewolf cults, which existed since the Paleolithic era and continue even today within some shamanic cultures, knowing that such animistic wolf shapeshifting has a lineage reaching back into prehistory. It gives us an understanding of the durability of the wolf and werewolf fixations today. This history offers us ways to also understand one of the reasons for the extreme persecution of surviving folk religions in the era of witchcraft. And I'm going to show you some photos about this. In the era of witchcraft persecutions and why 50% of accused witches were also executed for werewolfery. Most people don't realize this. a lot of people in the occult community or in the esoteric community know full well about the intensive and extreme murder and torment of quote unquote witches when the church finally decided they were just going to get rid of everyone who was a pagan or everyone who was not standing behind the church. What people don't realize, and I think I have some pictures here, is that half the people who were burned alive for being witches were also claimed to be, were also said to be werewolves. So this connection between shapeshifting, werewolves, and witchcraft, and pre-witchcraft, i.e., shamanism, i.e., paganism, all of this was happening in Europe before Christianity took over. And so all of these things are far more interesting when we step away from just sort of one narrow view of it and realize that from the ancient world on, shifting into werewolves and whatnot was a norm all over the world, all over, excuse me, all over the Western world and other places. So let's talk about it. This is the beginning. So this is the first image that I was able to find of a werewolf. And this one is right around 400,000 years old, Paleolithic cave in one of the Lascaux caves. So it literally, everybody who, everything I've been reading historically about images like this, they do call it a werewolf or a therianthropic um, person. So so what you have here is you have this is this sort of like the roots of the beginning of prehistoric, like what do werewolves do, right? Well, in this case, it's a matter of survival and a matter, and so you're looking at ancient historians or excuse me, ancient people who were trying to keep their people alive and all these sorts of things. So this idea of shifting into a half animal, half human was quite obvious, and there's lots and lots of images of this. Again, like four or five, maybe 300,000 years ago, we know this existed. In fact, animism and all of these ideas, where shamanism originally came from, way, way, way before any other religious traditions. So here we have, someone who's trying to save his people, trying to kill deer so they can eat, went into some sort of shamanic or whatever shift and transformed into a werewolf. So we start to see these things very, very early on. Petroglyphs in ancient caves are some of the earliest indications of human culture and beliefs and seem to show animistic shapeshifting as shown in some of the earlier therianthropic or beast man images, ever in the form of ancient cave paintings. Here we can find magical animal man shapeshifting images, indicating by extension the beliefs and rituals they indicate. So this is just a little wrap about 30 to 35,000 years ago. There was an explosion of symbolism in Paleolithic human culture. Anyway, there's a lot more here. But I love the term therianthropic beings because it's a very clear idea of shape shifting, and it became a kind of a norm in historical circles. Among uh, images, therianthropic of werewolf cave paintings have been found. Let's move on. The neurophysiological and ethnographic evidence that I have adduced strongly, this is a quote, not me, that I have adduced strongly suggests that these subterranean images we have an ancient and unusually explicit expression of a complex shamanic experience that is informed by altered states of consciousness. Okay, and this comes up again and again in terms of those who are talking about mushrooms and other things that people use throughout history to have different kinds of experiences. So this is probably also part of the shape-shifting reality. So the prevalence of wolf power, spirits, and shapeshifters. Uh, Japan is even one of the fewest animistic cultures today based on Shinto. I lived there for 4 years. Uh, in Japanese culture, there is still a shamanic belief in wolf people, also Okami, the great wolf god. So if you go to Japan and you walk around into the shrines, you can go to werewolf shrines. An Okami. Kami basically means God. It's a little bit looser than that. And O means supreme. So apparently, wolf spirits, wolf powers, wolf gods, and people shape-shifting into wolf were some of the earliest shamanic stuff that happened in Japan prehistorically. It's kind of interesting to me. So I'm just kind of hopping around here. Historically, there are also a pervasive legendary belief in wolves as divine ancestors. Several royal lineages throughout Western and other parts of the world. Um, Kings and queens are often identified as being wolf or having some sort of wolf um, internal shift of some kind. So historically, there are pervasive legendary beliefs in wolves as divine ancestors. There's a lot of this, by the way. Several royal lineages are traced directly back to ancient mythic wolf ancestors. This includes Turkish stuff, Turkic tribal lore, myths regarding Mongolian royalty. Even today, a number of Native American tribes honor a wolf totemic tribal ancestor. In Iceland, where a country I got to go to, Viking shape-shifting kings who are also titled wolf-born are still remembered. So traveling around that country was very interesting in Iceland. They When I started talking about werewolves, I had tons of people talk to me. They were like, "Oh yeah. No, we're as Vikings, we were definitely werewolves, and it's not a big deal, you know." So, and we can talk about other things, but we all know what berserkers are, right? Berserkers can also be identified as berserk. Berserk means they are shapeshifting from being a bear or becoming a bear, right? What they don't talk a lot about, but you can find, is the Ulfsark. The Ulfsark are the werewolf shifters. Yeah, and I think I have some pictures here. Uh, it was very traditional. I've met legitimate shamans, the Nani Doro shamans from Siberia, who I was able to interview, as well as practicing shamans in central Guatemala and Oaxaca, Mexico, all who identify as therianthropic of magical shape-shifting practitioners. So while there's a lot of flexibility in these conversations, the idea of shape-shifting was more or less agreed upon by almost every shamanic person I talked to. I'm talking about serious shamanic people, like in rural Mexico and in the jungle of Guatemala, not American stuff, per se. Okay, so let's talk about the history of the werewolf cults. For thousands of years and across, and by the way, I can stop and ask if anybody has questions, because I'm on a roll, and I taught university for 30 years, so bear with me, okay? The history of werewolf cults. By the way, I didn't used to teach this in university. I taught how to teach. I was teaching teachers how to teach and about linguistics. So anyway, just so you know, a history of werewolf cults. For thousands of years and across many different cultures, werewolf cults were an accepted fact, as was the ability to shapeshift into werewolves. So I'm gonna talk about some of the key things. The first werewolf that we can find is in Mesopotamia. That's the first legitimate terminology and actual writing that we found. Earliest surviving written account is just 2600 BC, was the Epic of Gilgamesh, which many of you probably have heard of. Um, it mentions a young shepherd who fell deeply in love with the goddess Ishtar. He called on her often and left many offerings at her shrine until she grew bored with him, and she turned him into a wolf and sent him off. And apparently, the dogs chased him and killed him. So that's our first holy moly moment of, like the first werewolf that was actually written in a text. The one that everybody knows about is this one, and I'm sure many of you have seen symbolism of this or images of this. So the first the first Greek pre Greek actually, there was a cult in way up Mount Lycaon, and it was there way before the whole Hellenic world came together and became, it became clear of talking about Zeus and Aphrodite and all these gods. This actually predated that. So the cult of Mount Lycaon, prehistoric and Hellenistic Greek, so pre-Hellenistic Greek. So this is the classic. This is a classic image of, in short, what happened was there's a King Lycaeus, okay, and he was clearly in charge of the werewolf cult of his temple, and this is way up in the mountains. So there was an ongoing wolf cult and werewolf cult. We don't know how far back it goes because it was prehistoric. We've done some digging, and so again, it's before Hellenistic period time, and so he was both the king and he was the person who was the priest of this temple. But there was the cult of Zeus sort of came in, and there was a bit of a war there. And I'll okay. So let me go back. According to ancient Greek historians, werewolf cults at Mount Wolf Mountain is what it was called. Dated from prehistory and predated worship of Hellenistic gods. The sacred mountaintop sanctuary of Mount Lycaon in Arcady, Greece, was likely the oldest center of werewolf cult worship in Greece. It was dedicated to a very ancient wolf god, allegedly named Lycaeus, meaning wolf god. In later Hellenistic times, Lycaeus became attached to the names of other gods. For example, the god governing the temple changed and became Zeus. What happened was, and this is not uncommon, the people who were, I guess we could say, cult or whatever, that were Zeus worshippers, it came and there seemed to have been some sort of fight, and they took over the temple, and therefore Zeus became the main god of the temple, not Lycaeus, though they started calling him Zeus Lycaeus. In other words, they just mixed the werewolf god with Zeus. Another temple nearby, by the way, about half a mile down the hill, was an ancient temple to Pan, and again, the wolf god or the wolf side to Pan was connected, and that temple is now became known as the Pan-Lycaeus temple, i.e., the werewolf / Pan. So this was all really before a lot of things happened in ancient Greece. So this is the image that kind of stuck in the Hellenic world, which was, this is Zeus. He's sitting there waving his hand. Zeus came to the temple as the god and had an encounter with the Lycaeus, the person who was head of the temple, and he the story is that they tried to feed Zeus human flesh to see if he really was a god, right? Well, the first thing he did was he suddenly showed himself to be the god Zeus in this story, and boom, turned the priest into the first werewolf, Lachias. So Lachias, who was the head of the cult, now in this image suddenly is turned into a werewolf and sent off into the wilderness. Different stories came up about how that happened, and what actually happened. What some say he was gone forever, that was it, and Zeus took over. Others say he disappeared for 7 years or 9 years and came back as a human being again. Um, anyway, so the god got extremely interesting in terms of Lachias and the wolf. The wolf energy and the wolf god kept going. For example, the god governing the temple changed and became Zeus Lachias, as I said, Pan Lachias. Also, the god Apollo became known as Apollo Lachias, and um, in the major temple in Hellenic Greece, there are huge stone symbols of Apollo as a wolf, which you rarely hear about and you rarely see, but you can certainly look it up. In Arcadia and elsewhere, the cult of the wolf god was widespread, and Lycaea festivals and games honored this deity, and even today. So even today in like the Pan temple, they have a wolf festivals, Pan wolf festivals. So, okay, in 380 BC, Plato, I think everybody here knows Plato, mentions King Lycaon as the prehistoric protector turned tyrant of the shrine of this wolf god temple. Ovid also, so I have a lot of historical stuff, tells us the full story about Lycaon, who made the mistake of offering Zeus cooked human flesh, etc., etc., etc. According to Ovid, Zeus, being a god, realized what was up because got very angry, and turned Lycaon into a werewolf and all that. So it again, different cults were moving in and out, and this is what happens. So here's an image from ancient Greece of Lycaeus or others like him being shape-shifting into a wolf. The Greek historian Agrippias relates in his journal that the famous athlete Demosthenes assisted at a human sacrifice to Jupiter Lycaeus there and ate it. Okay, again, eating flesh apparently was not a terrible thing at that point. He was changed into a werewolf for 9 years, and then he came back and he was fine, and took part of the Olympic Games. So there's all this stuff happening that's very interesting. So you could be manifested, shifted into a werewolf, and then gone off into the woods or someplace, and then coming back, and you're kind of seen as a hero. So this is all very interesting stuff. The Roman historian Pliny quoted Avanthus, who tells of a related primal Greek werewolf ritual practice in which it was used for becoming a great hunter. Yeah, this is a good one too, where they would send someone would shift into being a werewolf, and they'd go across a lake, and they would hunt, and they'd be sent into the wilderness basically for a period of time, with the idea that they were shifting into werewolf form, doing just living life in a purely uh, open sense, and then coming back in and shape shifting again. So I can go on and on. So I'll just move on a little bit. Um, so all of these things are powerful places. Um, so wolf, and we talked about wolfish Pan already. I don't need to say that much. But Pan is probably the oldest god in ancient Greece, and the fact that he's always still shown with half goat and half man shows that, and the fact that he is also apparently from the very beginning connected with werewolfery. which is an intriguing concept. And again, I don't want to go too sideways. So the cult of Apollo, we talked a little bit about. There he is. That is the god Apollo as a wolf. That's the werewolf Apollo. Uh, the cult of wolfish Apollo or Apollo Lycaeus spread to many parts of Greece, but it was centered on the Corinthian isthmus and especially in Argos. It may seem strange that the sun god Apollo was associated with wolves, but one of Apollo's original form was that of a wolf, as his mother Leda escaped Hera with the help of divine wolves before giving birth to him. And his sister Artemis was associated with wolves and is also shown as a werewolf. Most people don't realize this one. Was associated with wolves and werewolves. Wolfish Apollo was known as a protector of humans in peril and master of wolves. So this wove through everything in ancient Greek. But if you notice, if you read about Greek history and Greek stuff, all the wolf stuff has been taken off. It's kind of intriguing. This just moving around, I'm just showing you a bunch of places where werewolfery was huge. In Scythia, well-known Greek historian Herodotus took werewolf cults seriously. In his travels in 425 BC, he wrote about the Nuri. The Nuri were a nomadic tribe. He visited in what is now part of Russia. He recounts now that the entire tribe changed into werewolves for set periods of time every year. So you're going to see this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I want you to be aware that this showed up over and over and over and over again all over the ancient world. That people would come in to a tribe and they'd see people and they'd say, "Oh, this week, tomorrow, we're all going to shift into werewolves," and the entire tribe turns into werewolves. And having done lycanthropic rituals at big festivals, I literally I was surprised, but I literally got like over 100 people to shapeshift and just kind of lose their cool. So I don't claim to be like, one of these gurus from the ancient world, but it's a thing. People can move into that mode. So here are some. So we move into ancient Rome, where we know for a fact that the Romans had everywhere in wherever ancient Rome was, werewolves were part of their cult. So here are some images. Romans were all about wolves and werewolves, as Rome was founded by the wolf goddess Lupa, wolf goddess, right? Roman culture is likely where much of the werewolf lore that spread into Europe originated from. So we've got a couple of images here. Okay, so Lupercalia. Some of you might know Lupercalia, which Lupercalia basically means everybody runs amok as a wolf. Lupa, lupus, wolf, right? So this is a painting of Lupercalia, where everyone would completely lose their minds, and everybody was very drunk and probably doing some sort of other drugs, and they ran amok, and the priest of the temple would go into a deep trance state, shapeshift into being wolf forms, and then run around with a goat skin and whip people who wanted to get pregnant or who just wanted to be blessed. So Lupercalia is well worth your time and effort. If you want to read something wild, you can find it almost anywhere. But it's pretty far out stuff, and I won't go deep into it. It's very, very sexy. So werewolves were famous in ancient Rome rather. The historian Petronius relates a personal story of a soldier. I can tell this story very quickly. That he hired a soldier to guide him going to another town at night because he didn't want to get robbed. And halfway there at night, the guard suddenly jumped off his horse and said, "Oh, I gotta go." And he ripped off all his clothes and turned into a wolf and disappeared. and the guy, this who's telling this story is Petronius, who's a very well-known writer in ancient Rome. And he said he was really angry. He said, "This is what happened, and I'm really unhappy about it." So he gets to a farmhouse, and what he sees is that there's everybody's running around screaming and yelling, and he said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, a wolf came and attacked our sheep, but we stabbed him in the arm, and he's gone." To make a long story short, he ends up doing his trip, going back to ancient Rome. He's really angry. He finds the house of the soldier, knocks on the door, and he's lying in bed with a huge bleeding injury in his arm. And he finally admits that, yes, I'm a werewolf. So, but this didn't cause people to get burned alive. They were just like, oh yeah, he's a werewolf. They're in ancient Rome. They're called Vespellus. Excuse me, Versepolis. Let me get it right. So Versepolis means werewolf, and it was very common in ancient Rome that a quarter of the people there were actually werewolf shifters. You don't see this stuff written very much because people kind of push it to the side, right? But there it is. The wolf cults of ancient Italy present the appearance of a religious survival from a remote time in the realm of ancient augury and popular superstition. The wolf was more conspicuous and more highly venerated in Italy than any other animal. Okay. So again, this is from the Lupercalia. So I talked to you a little bit about the Lupercalia. I won't go deep into it, but it's known as the Wolf Festival. Most of you probably know Romulus and Remus. They were the founders of Rome. But how did they become the founders of Rome? Because they honored Lupa and Lupus, the wolf gods, female and male, and so this has always been part of ancient Rome as well. The wolf thing, the werewolf thing, is embedded in every single ancient historical stream I could find. I did not plan to do this. I was writing this stuff up about werewolf magic. I wasn't even planning to write a book about werewolf magic. And I said, well, I'm a historian. I'm gonna go see. And I was utterly shocked. Literally half my book is about like the fact that a large number of people were believing in all this. So so we've already talked a little bit about the founding of Romulus and Remus, of Lupa and Lupus, the Lupercalia, the Wolf Festival, uh, and all these things were supposed to bring fertility and joy and power and intensity. Um, there was plenty of sex everywhere, of course, because that was ancient Rome. The festival was named after Lupercus, the wolf god, but the title Lupercus seems to have been created as a title for this mysterious god, this wolf god, who I started telling you all the way back in prehistoric times. The term Lupercus or Lupercais, um, but we don't really know what the name of that wolf god was. It was hidden. So, but this is the standard, and it starts to show up everywhere. Um, so let me move forward. Yeah, with werewolf priests running, howling and running amok, whipping unclad women. Yeah, that's how the Romans partied. And it was like a 3-day orgy with werewolf cult people whipping people. I mean, it does sound like kind of fun. I mean, okay. The funniest part is like when they tried when Christianity came and took over Rome, they tried to get rid of Lupercalia, but Lupercalia was the most popular festival in all of Rome. I mean, think about it. It was like an ongoing orgy for like a week, and drinking and carrying on, and was very very ancient. So the Pope, this is in 1494, tried to get rid of it, right? And he said, okay, we're going to get rid of Lupercalia, and we're going to call it the Festival of the Purification of the Virgin Mary. It didn't work. I mean, they tried, you know. I mean, that just did not work. So so people kept coming and doing Lupercalia, and even though the Pope is like, no, you can't do that, it was not working out. So finally, and this is gets where it gets interesting. They decided to uh, move to a different cult member, I guess, or I don't know exactly what he is, but Saint Valentine's Day. I guess he's a saint, right? Saint Valentine's Day gets moved to Lupercalia, and the funny thing is that it wasn't supposed to be about love, and you know this saint had nothing to do with sex or love or any of this stuff. So they just said, okay, Valentine's Day is here, and we're just going to make him the god of love. So that's how we end up with Lupercalia and how we ended up with Valentine's Day. I think that's hilarious. It's never, massive orgies just never go away. All right. So I'll tell you a couple more things. I mean, I can see what time we're almost at one, so I'm going to try to work my way quickly through this. But the werewolf cult of Soranus and Dispater. So these are other parts of North Italy. So Soranus and Dispater, they're come from a different culture. It's called the Sabine culture. It got moved, it got sort of absorbed by ancient Rome, but they were very, very different people and had a different cult. Um, so it was a very ancient thing. And what was interesting was they tended to be in their main religious centers, tended to be near all these caves that had gases in them. And it was kind of it's this very weird place, and it's still there today. Um, so uh, they started having, they had wolf cult rituals. Again, we don't know why. Were completely different from Rome. Um, and um, they started how they ended up with this. They also started doing uh, fire walking, which there's no other cult in the ancient world in what I've been talking about. There's nobody else does fire walking, but the Soranus lovers did. And how this happened, and I'll make it a quick. I won't read the whole thing. Um, they were worshiping the god Soranus, who's also known as Dispater, a god of the underworld, but it's another interesting god form. And one day the priests were all doing this thing and had food on the altar, and a whole pack of wolves came in, grabbed the food, and ran out. And all the priests started chasing them, with knives and things, and ran and followed them into a cave. And what they found out was they started to like die. They started to get, because they were going in a cave where there's a bunch of gas. The wolves were going in under the gas, right? So anyway, they ran out and they were really furious, and they did a big ritual to surround us and said, "Hey, we had food for you, and you da 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 da. These wolves, they're bloody wolves." And the god showed up to them and said, "Hey, the wolves are my people, and what you guys need to do is get your act together, and you need to celebrate the wolves, and you need to be nice to them. And this is what you got to do, because you've ticked off me and you've ticked off my wolves." So apparently the god says this to them, that they have to start doing fire walking. So and even today they still do it there. They put out burning coals, and then they go into a trance, and they invoke the gods, and then they walk across, just like you've all seen fire walking. But there's no other group that I know. There's no other cult that I know of that does this. So it's kind of intriguing, but it was all for the wolves and the wolf gods. In ancient Rome, Ares and Mars were also deeply involved in wolf cults. And you can read this if you want, but I won't spend a lot of time on it. But they would carry the statue of a wolf in fights, into wars. Um, the soldiers often had symbols of wolves with them. The wolf thing was connected with Mars, but it was also connected with the other gods. The Roman historian Livy tells us that a statue of Mars was on the Appian Way, a major place in Rome, um, with images of wolves. And Horace talks about the Martis lupus, the iconic warrior wolf symbol, and that's the symbol that was carried in wars. So, moving on to Viking Norse werewolves. This is a very interesting, very ancient image of Vikings. And what we've got here we've got ostensibly what I've seen is they're recognizing them as shapeshifters, but it's hard to know. It's very old. But these are two different beings in this era, in this place. Yeah, yeah. I guess we could say Norse. Um, but this is someone who's going into a trance state and is a warrior, and then this is a shapeshifter. This is an Ulfsark. That's a werewolf shapeshifter. So wolves and werewolves were everywhere in what is now Germany and Scandinavia, as well as Saxon England. Wherever Odin or Wotan, the god of shapeshifting and wolves, was worshipped. Keep in mind he had two wolves next on either side of him. These wolves were sacred, very important. I think it's Eki and Freki, if I remember right. The werewolf and other shapeshifter. So werewolf and other shapeshifter cults of the Egi Einhammer are who those not of one skin or shapeshifters. These are some of the Odinist people of all kinds who took that. Either they were born with this idea of shapeshifting into wolves or bears sometimes. And also the Satyr or sorcerers or Satyr assisted warriors, who the saga said could change to man beast, most commonly wolf men or bear men, right? This is a really normal thing. If you travel around, I traveled around um, um, Sweden and Norway and a bunch of places, and Ireland and Iceland as well. And they all accept all of these things. Like if you just start talking about some of these things, they're like, oh yeah, my great grandfather was a werewolf and stuff like this. So I can go on and on. Um, Odin, whose name can be translated as master of ecstasy, was a patron of shapeshifters, very much associated with wolves. It is said that he could fall into a trance of ecstasy and project his soul into the form of another person or animal while appearing to others to be asleep or dead as he traveled forth in various forms. He wore a wolf skin always, if you take a look at his images. And there it is, Gary and Freki were his two wolves. One is named Ravenous and the other is Greedy. The Valkyries, by the way, the demigoddesses who carried the honored warrior dead to Valhalla, rode spirits of wolves when they came down to pick up the dead and bring them up to Valhalla. So obviously wolves were a big thing. Berserkers were most likely the most famous Norse wolf shapeshifters in many ways. Through shapeshifting cult rituals, many took on the aspects of bestial wolfish men with warrior prowess. Um, by the way, if you get a chance to see the movie, it's been on and it's really good. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. Um, I'd have to look it up. There's a wonderful one where the it's set in ancient Let me think about it before I talk anymore. It's such a good movie. I've got to find it. It's set in the realm of Odin. It is said that such a werewolf sorcerer was then able to do what a human and wolf could do. So that was a true werewolf or human wolf. When going forth in this manner, the sorcerer went on what was called a wolf ride or gandale. So this is just an image. So we can also talk a little bit about um, Ireland and other parts of England, um, where the werewolves and wolves were considered to be really important. In fact, wolves in England and Ireland were considered to be kindly and supportive, and the ones who were the top fighters who kept the people safe. So this is kind of an image. This is fairly modern, but it's taken from an older image. I can't read the Gaelic, but it gives you an image what we're talking about. Wolves and werewolves were often seen in a very positive light in the Celtic world. In Ireland, certain tribes in Ossory, which is a very, very interesting place in Ireland, where even today the people in Ossory um, give big thumbs up to werewolves, and a lot of the most important tribal warriors, some of the most important warriors in Irish uh, ideas and stories were also considered werewolves. To be a werewolf meant you were a top supporter of who and you took care of everyone in your tribe. Um, so the Ireland, certain tribes in Ossory were reported to become werewolves in Yuletide, devouring livestock, getting wild, and afterwards turning back to human form. Other Irish tribes claimed their ancestors were wolves and often prayed to wolf spirits and wolf gods for help and healing. One Celtic werewolf tribe was said to change into werewolves every seventh year. This seems to have been a ritualistic shapeshifting like the Scythian Nuri. Druids were said to be able to shapeshift into werewolves. As part of their sorcerous work, and even in Mercia, a central part of the 10th century, um, long after Christianity had come, there was a revival in the teaching of paganism, pagan learning, led by two archdruids, one named Werewolf, and the name Spirit Wolf was given to those who opposed Christianity. So there was a huge fight between Christianity and paganism that still existed there, and werewolfery. So I think it's fascinating to see this over and over again. By the way, there's a lot of people in Ireland who have strong feelings about wolves. The wolves themselves are gone from Ireland, but they're seeking to bring them back again. But there's a strong feeling of them. Opponents of Christianity were often called werewolves as the Christian conquest spread. One pagan opponent, Verdicus, king of Wales, along with his whole tribe, was said to have been turned into werewolves by St. Patrick himself because he refused to convert. The clan is still around, so I guess they're fine. There's several different versions of this. The main one is they basically got rid of him. So wolves are often connected to royalty in the Celtic world. And the famous King High King Cormac Mac of Ireland was reared by a she-wolf. In many Irish and Welsh myths, the wolf is very often a helper, a guide. Um, and then there's also in Scotland, the Wolvers. I don't know, have any of you heard of Wolvers? Okay. The Wolvers, yeah, just for one moment here, the Wolvers are still believed by people in Ireland. excuse me, in Scotland, that they are werewolves who fish and they give food to people and they don't bother anybody. So I don't know. If you just look up Wolvers, you'll get a kick out of it, I think. I don't know. So I'm moving on. So I'll go quickly here. Witchcraft and the witch cults in medieval Europe. I want to show you this picture because I mentioned it earlier. This is a medieval image of all these people being murdered, of all these witches being captured and murdered. But I want you to notice something. So here's people being burned alive, right? And then here's people getting ready to be burned alive. But if you notice, some of them are werewolves, right? And then you've got these are the good people who are trying to kill everybody who's evil. But you can start to see in different places there are werewolves. There are werewolves that are supposed to be witches who then get pulled into being burned alive. It takes a little focus to get some of this stuff, but you can see like there's a walking werewolf. You see? So this shocked me. I when I was started doing this, I didn't know that half of the people burned alive were also considered werewolves. I found it out in several places. Um, so some festivals and folklores that continue the old ways with werewolfery, i.e., being shapeshifters. As part, pagan survivals in newly Christianized Europe left few, if any, verifiable records, but we do have the records of the Christian conquerors who suppressed surviving pagan religious traditions. Shape-shifting, wolf festivals, and werewolf cults were part of this evil that the church set out to destroy and is found in medieval documents, where numerous werewolves and witch shapeshifters were seen as evildoers sent to do evil work. And they were burned alive. You don't hear about that very much. Some scholars believe that around 50% of all those accused of witchcraft were also accused of werewolfery, which is, by the way, a wonderful word, werewolfery. I can go on, but I don't want to talk about too much, but I have this in my book. But the Lupus Dei, or Wolves of God, is to tell you, I'll just tell you the story in a very, very quick writing, or looking at my writing and trying to nail it quickly. So there was a group called the Benedetti. I don't know if any of you have heard this. The Benedetti were also called Lupus Dei, or the Wolves of God. So they were werewolves, and they were quite open about it. And they were arrested by the church, and they had to go to a big, gathering, or I don't know, it was a trial, I guess. And the Lupus Dei were just badass people, because they stood up and they basically told the church to piss off. And they said, look, because they were like, oh, you're werewolves, you're for Satan. They're like, no, 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 no. We are the wolves of God. We are directly given the joy and power of having God support us as we go attack evil witches and any crimes and any evil stuff that's coming to human beings. We go into the underworld and we fight off other devils and demons and everything. That's who we are. We're the wolves of God. You can look this up, by the way. Lupus Dei, the wolves of God, the Benedetti. So they had for many days, they had this huge fight with them, and they stood up and they were like, nah. They said, well, do you go to mass? And they said, no, we don't need to go to mass. God speaks to us directly. We're the wolves of God. And eventually they let them go. So all I can say is, go team. Yes, Lupus Dei, one of my all-time favorite stories. You go look it up. You can't believe some of this stuff, the wolves of God, and they basically just kowtowed everybody, all the church people. They're like, no, you can't. What are you going to do? You're going to tell us that we're not we're with God. Are you with God? I don't think you're with God. It's more or less what they were saying to them. Anyway, all right. So let me move on. So there were werewolf cults. So example of which werewolves in 15, we're moving forward in 1521. An inquisitor named Boyne elicited a confession from a witch werewolf in rural France. So this is just, I'm giving you a short little synapse here about what the church is saying one thing, but what it really is going on about. So a master, this priest, well, we don't really know who he was. He wore black. He was, they call him the master. They showed up. He showed up to sort of help this guy with his sheep, and then pretty soon they all ended up coming together into sort of a witchcraft group. They met in the forest days later and agreed upon time, a place. Uh, so the Lord gave him some money. The Lord being this mysterious man who wore black. And so this is what when these people were arrested and tortured, this is what they told the priests, right? They danced. Lots of initiates came. They danced a special dance with green tapers, burning blue flames, then stripped and rubbed a special salve on their bodies and were quickly changed into wolves. So I'm bringing this up because this shows up again and again and again, that rubbing certain salves, probably psychedelic is what I'm guessing, or maybe actually partaking, and going into that kind of shapeshifter thing. There were ways of doing this. So, as with shamans who became exhausted after such journeys, a number of Roman and later witchcraft trial documents uh, spoke of such werewolves being exhausted for days and often laid up in bed, such as having astral adventures or whatever. But we don't know because, again, going back to ancient Rome, the guy who was found, the soldier who was found in his house with a spear through his arm had been attacked as a wolf. I have about a dozen same stories like this. Um, so just that's pretty much all I have to say. We have seen animistic and pagan shamanic shape-shifting practices spread in the ancient world, and then after the fall of the Roman Empire, possibly into Europe, where it seems that some werewolf cult practices continued within surviving folk magic traditions. For example, in the woods, or like in lots of places where families continued the old way, the old pagan ways, right? Where it seemed that some werewolf cult practices continued within surviving folk magic traditions, as well as in festivals that honor magical powers connected to the wolf. Another takeaway is that such pagan shape-shifting rites may have continued in hidden family and clan groups, which were destroyed by the church, again indicating surviving werewolf traditions from older times. We also saw the historical connection between the Lord of the Forest and the horned and hooved image of the medieval devil. Such similar wild and feral gods associated with wolves, like the horned faunus, pervades the pre-Christian world. Knowing all this helps create a framework for understanding werewolf magic today. We are now ready to see how we can reconstruct and revive these practices through creative practices, spells, and rituals rooted in historical research combined with inspiration and real practice. That being said, let's growl and howl and leap into work. I don't have anything else to add. Oh, that's pretty much it. So, anyway, does anybody have any questions? I mean, I tried to go as quickly as I could.
Yeah, what I think we're gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and give people a chance, maybe about 10 minutes for questions, and
Okay.
then we'll wrap this up.
Okay.